Hi guys, welcome back to the Chronic Chronicles. I'm your host, Lexi Halloran. Today we have Daisy, a holistic health coach who has not only navigated the challenges of endometriosis herself, but has found a way to live symptom-free. Daisy's journey is a testament to the power of holistic approaches to health in tandem with Western medicine. We'll be discussing her personal story, her struggles with disordered eating, and how she reclaimed her wellness through integrative methods. If you're living with chronic pain or simply looking for better ways to support your body, this episode's for you. Let's get into it. It's nice to meet you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Yeah. And where are you at? You're in the UK, right?
Yeah, I'm in London.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun. Okay, to get us started really quick, do you want to go ahead and give an introduction and a background kind of on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Daisy. I am a holistic
Mhm.
health coach and I work primarily with women who have endometriosis and other chronic health conditions.
And then you yourself have endometriosis, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about like your diagnosis story and when did you first suspect endometriosis? Like, did you just have really irregular periods or what did that like look like for you?
I think my period started when I was like 11 or 12. And
Hmm.
I remember even from the beginning just having like a lot of pain. I remember t times just being really upset, really struggling to get to school. It would
Yeah.
last for a really long time. I remember sometimes it was like 10 days of quite heavy bleeding,
Yeah.
which I think especially when you're in like your early teens is like it's just really hard work and really draining.
Hmm.
And I remember kind of like speaking to my mum about it and going to the doctors and ended up being put on birth control, I think when I was about 14, which
Okay.
when I look back now, it just seems wild that for a
I
14-year-old
know.
put on birth control. And then it did settle it a bit more. So the amount of pain and like the length of time I would bleed for, all of that did settle down a bit. But it was
Hmm.
still what I would say, like as I look back now and kind of knowing that actually any type of heavy bleeding, long bleeding, period pains aren't really normal and it's a sign from our body. There was still something showing up. And then in the kind of like few years after, when I started to become sexually active, one of the big things was I was just in so much pain. Like I almost just couldn't even really have sex. I
Yeah.
would get like massive bloating afterwards. I would be in so much like burning pain. It would honestly feel like someone had put like lemon juice or acid or something just
Oh,
inside me. And I just remember being like crippled by it.
yeah.
And again, it just tied into like you're like 15, 16, starting to meet boys and then starting to have sex. And it's this thing that everyone else seems like normal in inverted commas,
Yeah.
but actually you're just having like a terrible experience of it. So I remember starting to go to the doctors and I kept getting treated for UTIs and thrush. I think you guys call thrush something different.
No,
You
eh,
call it thrush?
like a yeast infection. I feel like that's the same thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
so typically, yeah, it's the same thing. I'll put in the show notes too, like the medical definition of thrust
Yeah.
as well, so people can know.
And I just kept getting treated for those, and I just kept being like, it's not working. It's just this
Hmm.
thing over and over again. And I think there was times that I was also getting recurring UTIs as well.
Yeah.
But I was just constantly given antibiotics and like these threes and stuff for the thrush. And I
Yeah, it gets into this like really bad. I know a lot of people that go through that cycle because what happens is like you get a UTI, you get antibiotics for it, and then the antibiotics flush out the bacteria, and then you get an overgrowth of yeast, which is flush or thrush. And then it's just this cycle, like you're just
yeah,
treating one thing after another, and you get a UTI from the thrush, and then you get thrush from the UTI and you can't get out of it. It's miserable.
yeah, totally. And then with the thrush as well, they also say that if you are sexually active, it gets
Hmm.
passed on. So you could be, your
Oh,
partner could get it, you could be in pain, and you could then go get treatment for it. And then like a week or 2 weeks later or whatever point, your partner then gives it back to you and you just get it again.
Yeah.
That was a massive thing that I didn't learn till later, that actually if you're getting treated for it, you and your partner should be treated together at the same time to close it
Hmm.
out. Otherwise, it is literally just like passing it back and forth. So I just like kept going to the doctors. And then I was just really lucky that one day there was this young female cover doctor in, and she was sort of like the first person who I felt like actually asked me more questions and was really trying to understand what was going on. And I remember lying
Hmm.
there, and she was like properly having a feel of my tummy and asking like more than just being like, oh, it's just this. She was kind of like, what are the periods like? How long have you been on the birth control? And I remember her saying to me, I think that you might have what we call endometriosis. I'm going to refer you to a gynecologist. And I got referred to a gynecologist, and then they decided to do a laparoscopy. I was quite lucky because back then, I think that I got referred to the gynecologist at 18, and then I had my
Hmm.
laparoscopy at 19. So it was a bit quicker, but it also just wasn't as well known. I mean, I'm 33 now, so we're speaking
Hmm.
like 14, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, so I had my first surgery and they said, yes, we found endometriosis. I think my first one, they said that they cut it away, but they could see that it had been starting to spread. So it was stuck to my bowels. It was starting to
Hmm.
move up the tubes to my kidneys. So they did a load of kind of clearing up at the time, but it was very much, I was told, like I remember one doctor said to me that basically you just need to wait until you get pregnant because you have a baby, it will stretch everything out, and then afterwards you just won't have endometriosis anymore. And I was like, I don't think that I want kids, so that's not really an option.
Hmm.
Um, and it did improve for a little while, but I just felt like psychologically, I was actually really badly damaged from it. It
Yeah.
had completely messed up what I thought of my body, what I knew of periods, of being able to have sex, of just like
Hmm.
that stuff. Um,
Yeah. That's a lot. And like, this is all when you're still a teenager, really. Like,
yeah,
before, I mean, you didn't even get the surgery until you were 19. So, like, this is all in those formative years when you don't, it's different. Like, I'm 26 right now, and I had surgery for it when I was 19. And even the amount of mental capacity that I have now is just so different than I I didn't understand any, like, I didn't have enough critical thinking skills to know back then what I do now. And I feel like you probably feel pretty similarly on that. That's a lot for a teenager to go through. And then especially like you have your friends around you and like you're going through those ages where you talk about boys and sex and you want that stuff to feel good. Like everyone else is saying that it feels good. And then you're sitting here being like, this is miserable for me. I don't know what you guys are talking about."
it was so hard
That's
because there was
hard.
no one to connect with. Like now it feels really different because like the Instagram world and social media is exploded and so many people are
Hmm.
sharing their stories and then so many people are connecting and like they're not feeling alone, but that wasn't going on back then. So it was like
Yeah.
I wasn't going to speak to my mum and tell her that actually it's really hurting when I have sex. She obviously
Yeah.
knew a period and the symptom side of the struggles. And then friends, like a few of them kind of struggled with their periods and period pains, but a few of them were like, oh, I just bleed for like 3, 4 days. I hardly notice it. I just use it too. And I'm like, what? How? And so it was just so hard to feel like there was no one understanding who I could really be raw with and be like, this is really,
Hmm. Yeah. Oh God. It's just it sucks too because now that I've been doing this podcast for a little while, I've talked to quite a few people with endometriosis and the stories are just so similar. And it's just sad to think about. Like for me too, I got diagnosed like 7 years ago. So it was like 2018. And even then, it was not talked about as much as it is now. Um, and just to think about that, there were probably so many women going to the doctor with like the same thing, and we're all just getting met with, oh, it's normal,
yeah.
is crazy to think about. I'm just really thankful that social media is such a huge thing now and people are talking about it. I mean, it's the whole reason that I even did anything with this podcast because in reality, it has a lot to do with my younger cousin she's 18 right now, so she's why can't I do math? Like 8 years younger than me. Yeah, so she's like 8 years younger than me, and she knows that I have endometriosis because I like talk about it with my family, and I talk about it with everybody now because I'm like, everybody should know what this is. And like when I'm walking around at work and I have my pants unbuttoned, you can ask me why. You can like look at me or whatever. Like I'm not gonna sit here and like feel uncomfortable for your comfortability. Like I'm gonna unbutton my pants because I'm so bloated from my endo. Anyways, so my younger cousin right now is pretty much going through like the same shit that I went through, and her
Yeah.
doctors just aren't listening to her. She's been in and out of the hospital. It's just a very like I'm watching my story unfold in her like the same way, and I'm over here like you have to advocate for yourself. Like
Yeah.
it's gotten to the point where I'm like, put your doctor on the phone with me. Like, this is ridiculous. Cause I'm like, you have endometriosis. I know you do. You're sitting
Yeah.
here and you're bleeding through for 3 weeks at a time. Like, that is not normal. So that also was part of the reason that I started a podcast because I'm just like, okay, it's obviously still not talked about enough. If 8 years later, I have somebody who's going through the exact same situation that I did. So it's just crazy.
It's really hard work. And it's like, it's amazing in some ways to see how it is growing and it is being spoken about more and it's being recognized more.
Hmm.
But I also just think the wider issue with just like Western medicine is that women are just constantly being gaslit by doctors. Like
Hmm.
we are just constantly told, like, are you sure it's not in your head? It's just a bad period. And it's just like, no, it feels like we're just not being taken seriously. Um,
Yeah.
and that's just, I have the same thing. Like I say to people, like, you really need to advocate for yourself. And I hate it, but I'm like, write a diary. You need to like do like a pain scoring thing, score your pain
Hmm.
every day, write down your symptoms, like write down how they're affecting you. Like I know women who have been like signed off sick for like long periods of time, or they're just not working because
Hmm.
it's so bad that they're actually struggling to function. And I just think
Hmm.
doctors are constantly just kind of like brushing it to the side and they're just like, or they just give out birth control to everyone. It's like it doesn't really do anything though. And also you're just masking the issue. It's not going to improve anything.
Yeah, that it's all very true. In fact, for me to get surgery for my endometriosis to like officially get diagnosed, my gynecologist made me do a chronic pain journal, like a diary, for a year before she even agreed to do the surgery.
That's a really,
So it's a really long time for and also keep in mind that I had been going through these things since I was like 13. So
yeah,
at that point, I had been going through it for like 5 years, and then she made me write in a diary for a year before she would even consider doing the surgery because she was just very much her mindset was surgery hurts you, it doesn't help you. So even if we go in there and we confirm that you have endometriosis, it's not going to change the outcome. But
yeah,
in my head, it was, but I'll know for sure if it is this. And then I can start understanding what it actually is. Because in the back of my head, I was like, what if it's not endometriosis and it's
yeah,
something else? And we're just clinically diagnosing that it's endo and we don't know. What if it is like I don't know, something completely different, and then we're missing it. And it could have been doing treatment for that. So her and I just like very much disagreed on it. Obviously, I ended up having the surgery eventually, and I did have endometriosis. So I'm glad that I did it, but it wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have done that journal. And I was like extremely detailed in it. I would write like my pain scale, I would write symptoms, like how bad my bloating was that day, how many days I would be bloating, how bad the bleeding was, if I had to like miss an event or something. Because there was a lot of times this was heavily when I was in college. So I would miss work or school, or I would miss events with friends, and I would be like, okay, like this is actually impeding my life. Like I can't.
totally.
So yeah, I really like that you suggest doing that because it's definitely a good idea. So that way, because your doctors don't see you for that long, but you're dealing with this every day. I don't know, really important stuff. So I do want to ask you a little bit about how you even became a holistic health coach. Like why that route? What was your mindset behind that? I'm assuming it had a lot to do with like your personal journey with endo.
Yeah. So I guess like since that point, I ended up having a second surgery again at 21, where they did
Okay.
still find some endo, but it wasn't as much as the first time. But it was still very much there. And during that 2 years, I'd been on birth control, like nothing had changed, but it was like it's
Hmm.
still there and it's still growing. So after that one, I was just still on birth control, and then it took about 4 years. It was around when I was like 24, 25 that I was then like, this just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem normal that I'm just stuck on birth control, and I guess I felt like I was almost coming into my womanhood, and I was wanting to understand my body a bit more, and I was just starting to get this really strong gut feeling that I don't want to be stuck on birth control forever.
Hmm.
So I started to learn a bit more about periods. I started to learn more about endometriosis. I went real deep diving into understanding hormones and women's hormones, and just like all of this very much like female health stuff. And I came off the birth control, and I was like, right, I really want to do like everything I can right now
Hmm.
to heal my body. And this was probably a similar time that I think my own personal development journey was really deepening as well. I was
Yeah.
interested, I was starting to work with a therapist, I was working with a coach as well. And I was like, some things just along my path, I was like, kind of wanting to undo them and get to know like who I was. So it all started to kind of unravel at the same time. So I just went on a really deep journey. I ate pretty well and I worked out and stuff anyway, but I really like nailed in that I was doing this like anti-inflammation diet. I
Hmm.
was really careful with things of like alcohol. I really learned about supplements and like what works and what didn't. And then there was kind of like a few practices that I brought in, which is the stuff that I really work with clients on. So one of them is using castor oil packs. They, if for people who don't know, they've been around for so long. Like they're used in Ayurvedic medicine. Like women were using them way more before Western medicine was even a thing. And what's amazing about them is they're able to pull inflammation out of organs and glands and tissues and everything. So I started to use castor oil packs a lot, and I would mix between having it over my pelvis or over my liver. The reason
Hmm.
for the liver is as you do pull out this inflammation by using the castor oil packs, everything then goes through your liver, so it can become almost a bit bogged down by the amount of toxins and inflammation. So I started to use those. I also started to do a lot of manual release. So I learned about, they call it yoni mapping. So it's literally about understanding like all of it, like the vulva, vagina, the uterus, how it's all made up, how everything works. So like one thing that I never realized is the reason a lot of women with endo are in pain during sex is your uterus is meant to be just free moving, but obviously
Hmm.
ours get stuck. So like mine was really stuck against the bowels, which is really common. So the
Hmm.
reason you have pain during sex is because your uterus is meant to be free moving as you have sex, but instead it's stuck somewhere. And the pain is because it's being jolted and pushed and like whatever is happening during sex. And it's like those little nodules where it's stuck is getting pushed and pulled.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's like a real process. And I would say that is a really big one that I guide clients through, especially when they're having pain with intercourse. And it's a really slow one because I think it can also be really triggering. It's a deep journey, and you have to get comfortable with yourself. You have to get comfortable with
Yeah.
being able to touch yourself in a way that isn't sexual. It's like you have to imagine it's like massaging if you've got knots in your shoulders or something. It's that kind of process. But it can just bring up a lot. I remember times when I would be really upset, or times it would bring up a lot of anger and fear and frustration, which makes sense because that they say for women, we hold a lot in our pelvic bowl. It's sort of just like this is, they say it a lot about like the hips, which is obviously the same area really.
Hmm.
But we hold a lot of our tension and trauma and pain in those areas. And on that kind of side of things, I'm very into psychology and stuff that I've learned about trauma is it is literally stored in our bodies. So another thing that they're kind of I've heard spoken about in the like holistic world for endometriosis is that our ancestors, the females who experienced things like maybe being witches and being burned, or the times that they could have been sexually assaulted, which, as
Mm-hmm.
we know, happens a lot these days. But going back happens so much more. And that trauma that is held in their womb, then they're pregnant with their children that is held there, and literally how it passes down. Because even like you said with your cousin, quite often you will find it's in the family. Other women in the
Mm-hmm.
family will have the same issues. Um, so I kind of just went on this really deep journey of like, what is the stuff that I can do that is not relying on Western medicine? And I came off the birth control, and it took me, I think it was like 9 or 10 months before I got a period. And then I got one, and I was kind of like, this is okay. And I was really just like, I wasn't sure. I was just like, this is just a journey, right? Who knows how this could go? And of course, I felt
Yeah.
really scaremongered as well because doctors were like, do not come off birth control. It's going to come back. It's going to be really bad. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm 33 now, so I've been off birth control for 8 years. And I was really heavily into those practices at first. I still use them now, but not as much as I was at the time. And yeah, since I came off and I started to get my period, I just never got the same level of symptoms. And I really do believe that it was the journey that I chose to go on. I was so sure in myself that I was not going to let this rule my life, that I wanted to let go and work through that stuff. It was very
Right.
much included with working with therapists and stuff as well, because there is a big trauma element that comes with it. And yeah, I have like a normal 28 to 29 day cycle now. I bleed for
Wow.
like 5 days. I get period pain on my first day. Definitely my energy levels are lower, but that's kind of it. Then I can be like yesterday was my day two, and I went to the gym and I was lifting weights and I felt good. Like I don't get the bloating
Wow.
anymore. Gut health is another one that actually is really big that I use with clients as well, is
Yeah.
the really building that up, because that's what I see that with endos, some women, when it's very bloating and gut based, doctors are just like, oh, you've got IBS. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where it's like you said, it's good to get the answer of what you've actually got, because once you know that and you can start to build up your gut health. And I think, again, lots of endo women have had a lot of antibiotics. So our
Mm-hmm.
gut health is just rubbish. Building that up to really help strengthen the immune system and everything as well, I think is really important.
Yeah, it can get really difficult with the gut health aspect of it too. Like it's all one thing that I have a problem with Western medicine is that everything is very like system based. I don't know, I'm sure it's very similar in the UK, but like you go to a different person for different parts of your body, right? Like you
Yeah,
have a cardiologist for your heart, you have so and so for whatever, you have a hematologist for blood, like a gynecologist for women's health. So you go to a different specialist per organ system essentially. And although that can be beneficial for certain things, like in the fact that these doctors are highly trained in that specific part of your body, the problem is that our bodies are all connected. And they know that, but it's almost like you go to the specialist and they forget that like your gastrointestinal system can be connected to your endocrine system. Like I don't, and I'm over here like, okay, my entire body is connected, and endometriosis is a whole body condition. It's inflamed, like I'm getting inflammation everywhere, and I have
yeah,
symptoms that are probably connected, but we act like they're not. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's really frustrating because yeah, like for a long time, I would get this like horrible, I mean, I still get really bad bloating, but when I was in high school, I would get this really horrible bloating, and I would get obviously I would have bad period symptoms, I would bleed for a long time. I had all the traditional endo symptoms, but before anybody brought up endometriosis, I struggled with a lot of like eating things. Like I would have acid reflux. I would eat a normal amount, but then I would gag after like every meal. And my mom's like, "What is going on with you?" Like she thought that I just like didn't want to eat all my food, but I was like, "No, I'm hungry. I ate it," but I would gag. And then we realized that I had acid reflux. And then it's just a whole bunch of things that are connected. Now, as an adult, I'm seeing like a naturopathic doctor, which is more of a holistic health practitioner, and she has pointed out that the acid reflux that I literally still have to this day, and sometimes I do have this like I have to clear my throat after I eat. She's like, that could be from some stomach issues that you just have never dealt with. And
Yeah.
it can also be from endometriosis. And I have a really, really low immune system. Like I get sick all the time. My partner, my boyfriend is like, I've never seen somebody get like you get sick constantly. And it can have a lot to do with like your gut bacteria. And endometriosis in itself, because we're at a higher risk for inflammation already because we have higher inflammatory markers. Of course, I'm getting sick more easily. Like my body is stressed out all the time. So it's been really hard to try to get that all under control. So I know that you talked about like doing an anti-inflammatory diet. What did that look like for you? Like, do you still do that now, or like how is your diet now?
I mostly do, but it's just because I feel good when I do it. But I definitely still have kind of like treats, like maybe I'll have like a
Hmm.
pizza every so often, and I definitely have a bit of a sweet tooth. I tend to do like more of my own baking now though, so I know what's in
Yeah.
it. But yeah, I would say like the main way I describe what it looks like is whole foods. So I am just very much like really good quality proteins. I'm like a massive fan of eating meat. I think that it's really
Hmm.
important. The bioavailability of that and the nutrients we get from it, you can't really match it.
Yeah.
Um, then just like vegetables, I eat loads of potatoes, loads of rice, just like it. A lot of people just think it sounds really simple and boring, but like I use sauces and flavors and like I love Asian food, so like lots of
Hmm.
stir fries, but it's like, yeah, it's got some good quality meat in it. I put veggies, but yeah, I'll make like a sauce of some kind and have noodles, but it's like I think sometimes people think that when you eat a low inflammatory diet, it's like you're just going to eat like plain rice, broccoli, and chicken, and it's going to
Hmm.
be really boring. But it's like it doesn't have to be. You can learn how to make it good and exciting and use herbs and spices, and you can still make it nice. But it's just like
Yeah.
such a difference on your body when you're buying ingredients and making food from that versus eating out of a packet.
I feel like the easiest thing for me in like staying with that like whole food thing is I used to buy a lot of like pre-made like salad dressings or like pre-made, I don't know, condiments really. Like the condiments is the hardest
Yeah,
thing for me because it's so easy to just like go buy a bottle of, I don't know, Caesar dressing or balsamic vinaigrette or something like that. And I've recently started, I didn't realize how easy it was to make a salad dressing. Like you
yeah,
literally just have to use like oil and some type of like vinaigrette or like vinegar. And
yeah.
then a lot of times I just throw like honey mustard in it or like Dijon mustard or something and that you have a dressing and it's really good. And I had no idea that it was that easy to do.
Yeah.
But then even that is so much more healthy for you than if you're buying like a balsamic vinaigrette in a bottle and then you look at the back and it has all these like seed oils in it and all this stuff and you're just like, "Oh my gosh, it has like 50 ingredients versus your 3 if you make it at home."
Exactly. And I think that's it. And I think that's what our generation has kind of lost, that we don't have the education around food as much. And convenience food is just so easy now that it's just like it's relied on so much. Like people are going into the office and they're going out and just going to like a supermarket or somewhere just to get food. And it's just like when you're just constantly eating like I also went mostly gluten-free, which is kind of what happens anyway when you do that kind of like whole food diet. But I think you just notice such a difference. Like for me now, sometimes I will grab food on the go and I can just feel it straight away. I'm just a bit like, oh, I can feel that heaviness and that sluggishness that it's just like, it's funny because I always say to people, I think that the more healthy you eat, the more sensitive you then become because your body
Yeah.
gets so used to eating better quality stuff that as soon as you have something that's a little bit off, it's like, whoa, like what is this? And you have more of a reaction from it. Whereas when people eat more processed foods regularly, their body's so much more used to it, and
Hmm.
the way that they kind of manage it, it's just they don't really get the kickback and the symptoms as much because it's not a shock to their system. So that's one
Yeah.
thing I do say to people is you will notice that you will become a little bit more sensitive to stuff as you improve the quality of stuff that you eat.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense too, though. Like that your body would be a little bit more sensitive when you start taking it out.
Yeah.
Um, so how long have you actually been, like you say that you're symptom free now from endo, right? Okay. So how long have you actually been symptom free?
I do say kind of like 8 years because I really
Hmm.
feel like since that point that I came off the birth control,
Yeah.
it was like that 9, 10 months, however long it was until I got a period. But even during that time, I wasn't really getting any symptoms.
Hmm.
But I had kind of really kick-started the stuff with the castor packs, the steaming, the like
Yeah.
really trying to work through the massage. And then I was doing that for, I don't know, maybe 3, 4 months before I came off the birth control. And then yeah,
Mm.
I never really got any big flare-ups or anything since then. I think there was like a few times where I was a bit like feeling unusually bloated or like more cramps than I would like to say is normal. But I would
Hmm.
say that over that time, it really did just get like better and better.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I was going to say is that something that I've started to do more recently, which I think is a big part of endo, which is probably a whole nother conversation, is doing parasite cleansing. If you've kind of heard much about it, it's probably another topic that I could speak about for ages, but
Yeah.
it's definitely growing and more people are hearing about it now, but they actually say that with endo as well, it's quite common that women have parasites. But
Hmm.
it's just such a process to go through to kind of prepare your body because parasites carry a lot of heavy metals and toxins and stuff. So in order to go through a process to cleanse them out of your body needs to be in a good place to manage that. There's a thing called the Hertz reaction. So if you start to do parasite cleansing when you're not really ready, you can actually get really sick because as the parasites die inside you, they give
Ugh.
off these heavy metals and ammonia and can make you really unwell. Um,
Yeah.
and it's a really interesting one because there's lots of like indigenous tribes where they speak about even as children, you start to parasite cleanse from a very young age because it's everywhere. They can come through our water system, they come through our
Hmm.
pets, even just like walking around barefoot. If you do any barefoot kind of grounding and stuff outside, it's really easy to pick up different types of parasites. It's normal. It's not something that's
Hmm.
like, oh my God, she's got worms or something. It's just a lot of have them. There's a normality to it, but also they can just carry a lot of stuff that's really bad for us. It's really interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard. I mean, I've heard about carrying parasites, but I haven't heard about it necessarily its connection with endometriosis. So that is interesting. I did want to ask you a little bit more about like your coaching style and how maybe how that differs from traditional medicine. Like what? So say, why don't you just walk me through like maybe an initial appoint, is it called an appointment? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
like
Like
um
consultation.
yeah.
Okay.
I also realized I didn't actually get onto saying exactly how I got into the coaching, but
Oh
the short
yeah.
was that I had done this whole process
Hmm.
and I think it was I was very into nutrition. I'd been kind of wondering, do I want to be like a personal trainer? How do I
Mhm.
wanted to do something more health related. And I decided to do my nutrition qualifications. And then at the same time, I did a holistic health and lifestyle coaching qualification. So then I got into coaching about 4 years ago. Um, and what my process is when someone's kind of interested in working with me, I do a
Mhm.
discovery call, have a chat to hear about them. I'm I'm kind of picky also about who I work with because I think that it's really important to work with people who you can help. And I think that,
Mhm.
as some people may know, the coaching industry isn't regulated. I could go out there tomorrow and call myself a career coach or a relationship coach with
Mhm.
certifications or anything. So I think that if you are looking to work with someone who can help you, find out what training they've done. You can ask to see their certificates, get their background, because there are people who will be like, I can be your endo coach, and it's okay, like what certifications have you done? And there's nothing.
Yeah, I did want to also touch on that a little bit too, because I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the US, at least like from people that I've heard from, it's not regulated. Like you can, and it's also, I don't know if you see this too, but on social media, like people will just say that they're a health coach or they're a nutrition coach or anything. Like you can just put coach behind your
Yeah.
name and you just, I don't know. So it's almost started to get to the point where like you just don't really know who is legitimate or not. So yeah, I was definitely going to ask you kind of about like what your qualifications were and
Yeah.
how, like when you take on a client, are you kind of like upfront about what you like that you are qualified for that to do that. So
Yeah, I mean, I try and talk about it. So, like on my website, I say that I'm
Mhm.
qualified. I mention Precision Nutrition, which is the company that I did my nutrition qualification with. And I mention the Czech Academy, which is who I did my holistic health and lifestyle coaching with. So, I mention those on my social media. But yeah, I think that's really important because
Mhm.
it's kind of what's killing the coaching industry now is that people who are genuinely qualified and doing that work are almost being diluted because there's just
Yeah.
loads of people who are going to be like, oh, I'm going to be a health coach or a lifestyle coach with no actual experience or certifications.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, when I get started, I have a chat with people because I really love to help people. It brings me so much joy. But what's important is that they are actually on board and want help. And
Mhm.
a really interesting position to be in because what I sometimes find is you will get people who come to you because they find you and they get excited and they're like, I really want this. But actually, once you ask some questions, I can just kind of tell that some people aren't quite there yet. And that is okay. And it's fine.
Mhm.
But it's like, when people are ready to make that commitment financially, energy wise, time wise, it is a lifestyle change, and you have to be
Mhm.
able to show up and commit to it to get the results. And it's like, I would love to be able to promise and guarantee results for everyone. And I really believe I can get there, but it's like, I can't do it for you. I can just
Mhm.
guide and lead the way. But yeah, so it really is like a massive, just the first session is what I call like the deep dive. And it's just all about background. And I want to know everything. It's like it isn't just your health stuff. It's obviously I want to know about your nutrition and any conditions that you've got. But I also want to know, what was your childhood like? Are you happy in your
Mhm.
career? Are you happy in your relationship? Have you got a support system? Where do you live? Like what's going on in the country where you are? Is what are your stress levels? What's your sleep levels? So it's like,
Mhm.
and I ask the questions, I'm like, how many times a day do you poop? Like how much are you having sex? What is it like? And I can tell that people are sometimes a bit like, but it's like it's so important that first of all, I want to make people feel comfortable enough to answer, but for me to know so much, it's like sometimes women come and they're like, oh, I poop like once every few days. And I'm like, okay, that to me, massive, massive red flag. But
Yeah.
some people just don't realize like you need to be pooping like 2 to 3 times a day is like the ideal. And even that I
Yeah.
say it, and people are like, what, really? And I'm like, yeah. So sometimes like where I start is like the most
Mhm.
basic stuff of like gut health and just like general what are your eating habits.
Mhm.
Um, a big thing in the way I work is creating wins. I think that there's this big thing that people want to do and change a lot, but each time you fail, it hurts and we carry that heaviness with us. So for me,
Hmm.
it's really about, okay, what are the little wins that we can get? Okay, if you don't drink much water for 2 weeks, I just want you to have one glass of water in the morning. And that's
Hmm.
it. Anything extra that you get, amazing. And it's like, how do we build those little wins? Because once you can start to get them as someone's on a positive momentum, we can really start to build in all of this stuff. But it would be
Yeah.
unfair for me to bring someone in and be like, right, we're going to change your nutrition, we're going to change your gut health, we're going to start doing yoni steaming, castor oil pack, all of this stuff, because it's just like really
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yeah, that's just not realistic.
Yeah, that's very much how I work. It's really at the pace of the person and what their capacity is. And some people are really
Hmm.
stressed, and so it's tiny baby steps. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I love this work, and I'm really interested in psychology. So this year, I've actually started my training to become a psychologist. So I'm
Ooh.
able to bring what I'm learning there into this as well. And a part of my stuff is being able to work with women who've got chronic health conditions because again, the stuff that we've spoken about as teenagers, what you go through and into your 20s, and it's just like
Hmm.
haven't got that support system and that understanding and someone to share with who gets you, I think that it can mess us up. It's probably the easiest
Yeah.
way to say it. So
Yeah, it
yeah,
definitely can. Speaking on like the mental health aspect of it, like personally for me, most of from probably 13 when I started having these pains and stuff until I was 19, and honestly, probably after that too, but I got diagnosed when I was 19. So even just in that period of time, I went through like so much. I just didn't even believe myself. Like I went through a period of
yeah,
time where it was like you can only in those young ages when you don't even really know who you are as a person and you are being told constantly that you're wrong, like you're not in the pain that you're in. There
yes,
gets to a point where you're like, okay, I'm crazy. Like I
yeah,
people are telling me that I'm a hypochondriac and that I'm not as sick as I am and I'm not in as much pain as I'm in. And at some point, you have to believe them and maybe think that you're the one that's wrong, especially when you're so young and
yeah,
you don't have like now as a 26-year-old woman, I know myself in the fact that like if somebody looks at me and tells me I'm not in pain, I can look at them and be like, you're wrong. Like I know my body, but I didn't know that when I was 13, you know? And I feel like a lot of women go through that. And then that can affect your mental health for a long time. Like I mean,
100%.
having not that's like such a basic thing that really just like gets taken away from you in the chronic health world is just confidence in yourself, and that's a hard thing to come back from. So I think that's really important that you know, like touch on that with your clients, and going back for psychology is a really good thing. I'm happy for you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then I also did want to say, have you heard of Some Days? It's like a natural period pain relief brand.
Yeah, I think I have. I think I've seen their social media.
Yeah, they have a so they're all like plant-based and they're also like science-backed, so they do research on their products. And they have castor oil packs as well.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I've done castor oil packs and it can get really messy when you do it yourself.
Yeah.
It can be like a really like difficult thing to do. So I actually get my castor oil packs from them because I mean everything that I've looked in their ingredient list and it's all natural and it comes like all in a pack and then it's just like such an easy cleanup. So, yeah, if anyone is interested in doing that, it's just kind of an easier way to get into it because it can be kind of hard to do it all yourself. Okay, I know that I just mentioned the Some Days castor oil packs, but I really want to mention it again. So, if you're dealing with endometriosis, period pain, or chronic inflammation, it can be really hard to find natural relief. That's where Some Days castor oil packs come in. These are really easy to use, typically mess free. They help reduce inflammation, promote detoxification, and soothe cramps, all while giving you a gentle, nurturing self-care moment. They're designed to be comfortable and effective, making them the perfect addition to your wellness routine. Whether you're managing a chronic condition like endometriosis, or you're just looking for a natural way to ease discomfort, these castor oil packs are a must try. Head over to Some Days and use code Chronic Chronicles at checkout to get 15% off. Your body will thank you.
And it's stain stuff. So I do have this little
Yeah.
document that I share with people. So I kind of say about, I don't know if you've seen those, you can get them in different colors, but it's like a pack thing. And then you like wrap it around and
Oh,
it's got the
yeah.
plastic bits. But even with that, I say to people, you need to wear like an old t-shirt or
Yeah.
something. Because once it stains, it leaves like oil marks or it like changes the color to like a weird yellowy tinge thing. So I'm like, don't wear anything nice with it, like an old towel, a dressing gown, something,
Yeah.
because it will stain and look gross.
Yeah. Yeah. All very good points. So yeah, you 100% can do it yourself, but if you want like a little bit of an easier
Yeah,
cleanup, Some Days has them on their website. Okay. I have a couple more questions for you.
yeah.
I'm gonna ask you about like some common misconceptions about your work and kind of if there's anything, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot, but maybe some common ones that you would like to like touch on or clear up.
I think the big one
Mm-hmm.
that I struggle with is that when I, even to this day, speak about the fact that I don't have symptoms, and if I say it in the way that I believe that I've healed my endometriosis, it triggers people like you wouldn't believe. I've been kicked out of Facebook groups. I've had like really nasty messages sent to me of people being
Mm-hmm.
like, "You're a liar. This isn't true. Western medicine, like doctors tell us there's nothing that you can do about it." And that's a really big thing that I butt up against. Like when I speak about
Mm-hmm.
it, people just can't get their head around it. But what I
Mm-hmm.
always say is there isn't a pill for it. And so, of course,
Mm-hmm.
the doctors, they haven't got anything that they can give you and they can tell you. And even when I went on this journey, I remember going back to see my gynecologist just to tell her about it. And like none of it, she had never asked me about my stress levels, about my nutrition, about anything like that. And when I went back and I was explaining and I was saying that like I didn't have symptoms, I even remember this like judginess from her of like whether she didn't believe me or she kind of thought that it was maybe like a temporary thing. But it was like there was an interest. Like I remember that she was asking some questions, but there was like this reservation that I could feel
Mm-hmm.
in how she was hearing me. And I would say that that's the biggest thing that I just seem to be triggering people a lot by speaking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I do know some other people, like I follow some other accounts on social media who also spoke about the fact that they've done the same. So I think that there is a movement that's coming, and there's women who are realizing that there's things that actually we can do to support our body and
Mm-hmm.
um our health, and even just including other chronic conditions. Like I also do work with a lot of women who have gut issues. So with like Crohn's and even though IBS is like a blanket statement,
Yeah.
working through different types of gut issues, and they are just like completely back to normal for some of them. So, and the truth
Mm-hmm.
is, well, it isn't for everyone. And for some people, it's a really long process. Like
Mm-hmm.
it can take like a year of making changes and building on stuff like rebuilding your gut health, understanding your traumas, working on your stress and your sleep and all of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But I would say that that's probably just the biggest one that I find. And it's hard because naturally it brings up a lot in me of like this, like, no, it's true. Like I
Yeah.
want to prove it. I wish that I was able to have conversations like this with everyone. I want people to hear this stuff to know that
Yeah.
it can be done. But sometimes I have to just be
Yeah.
like, some people don't want to hear it. Some people aren't ready to hear it.
It's
They're
true.
they're struggling and they're in pain, and I absolutely validate that. And I think when you're in that much pain and you're that deep in it, to hear that someone's saying that actually they did holistic and natural things and they're now
Mm-hmm.
symptom free, it's like there's a part of you that doesn't want to believe that really, because it's hard for you to hear. So I just think
Yeah.
the stuff like this, like it's amazing doing these podcasts, and I just hope that it lands for the right people, and that for some people they can just have an open mind and just be a little bit
Yeah.
curious, and
Mm-hmm.
what they need to hear will land. And yeah,
Yeah, I think that yeah, there's a lot that I want to say about that. And I there was definitely a time in my life when I was probably like 21, 22, when I was just so frustrated with, I don't know, I don't want to say the world, but like kind of the world, because I
Yeah.
was just like, I was very much in kind of like a victim mentality, and I was like, why me? Like, this is not fair. There's no cure for it. I didn't really feel like any of the like quote unquote treatments were like fair. I'm like, this is not doing anything. And I was like trying to come to terms with the fact that like it was chronic. And there was no, like, my doctors also never really said anything about nutrition. The one thing my doctor said is that I could cut out dairy and gluten and like sugar. They were like, okay, you can cut all this stuff out. And I'm over here like a 21-year-old who is trying to figure out like how to like cook for myself, like things and I'm like, what do you mean cut out dairy, gluten, and sugar? That's like everything that I like. Like what
Yeah.
am I gonna eat? So I wasn't in the headspace to do anything like that. And also like that didn't seem like a like there wasn't she wasn't giving me really research to back it up. She was just saying like people have said that it helps. Like you could try that. Anyways, I was very annoyed at the world in that sense. And I remember like anybody who would say something about endometriosis and be like, oh, you know, I don't know, I on social media, some people would say like some holistic things to help endometriosis symptoms. And I think I was just in that mindset that I was like, nothing helps. Like, what are you saying? And I would get like annoyed. Obviously, I'm not going to attack people on social media, but like I would like scoff to myself if I would see it because I would be like, oh, whatever. Like they're saying that they're doing this, they got off birth control and they're doing these things. And I'm over here miserable. Like it's hard to be in that mindset and see people like you don't believe them because you're like, how is that true when I'm having my doctor say this stuff to me? But then, I think it's kind of like, unfortunately, something that people with endo or chronic conditions kind of have to go through is just like their own learning process in it. And I think that maybe I don't want to speak for like everybody in the endo community, but like I guess I'll just speak for myself. Like when you do, especially even now, like on TikTok, there's just so much misinformation. So when
Yeah.
people are saying like, oh, I healed my endometriosis naturally, you're like, did you? Like, what do you, and you don't know if people are saying stuff for like clickbait or if it's real. So it can get really confusing. And I think that might be why,
Yeah.
unfortunately, even though you are honest and you did, and you're over here like, I'm just trying to help people. Like, I'm just saying I'm symptom free right now. Like, this is how I did it and I want to help you. People are like, liar. So
Yeah.
I really don't. I'm hoping that yes, people hear this and they have the people that are ready to have an open mind about it, hear it, and can, take what they want from it and
Yeah.
start thinking about things. But I 100% agree with you. Like you have to be in the right mindset to take on that journey because it's not there's also like I'm sure you have as well, but I've also been through parts of my endo journey where like I wasn't ready to hear. Like even now,
Yeah.
it's been 8 years since my diagnosis, and I kept going back to Western medicine every single time, and I kept going back to my gynecologist and being like, "Why aren't you helping me? Like,
Yeah.
why can't you do more for me?" And she's looking at me like, girl, I can't do anything more for you. Like I've told you, I can't do anything for you. I gave you the birth control. I gave you pelvic floor physical therapy. That's all I have. And I'm like, do more. Like you're not doing enough. So
Yeah.
now finally I'm in the mindset to see a naturopathic doctor and like try acupuncture and try an anti-inflammatory diet and try supplements. And I feel like it took me until now to be like, okay, I'm in so much pain. I have to try something different. Like, I'm ready to try the holistic stuff now. But for a long time, I was like, there's got to be an easy way out. And there's not with endo. So, just like you said, like, you may be symptom free now, but it wasn't like there wasn't a magic pill for you to do that. So, um, yeah, it's definitely a journey.
Yeah. And that point as well, like some people just like, oh, okay, well, what supplement should I take? And I'm like, no, it doesn't
Yeah,
work.
no, it doesn't work like that.
It is really almost like a whole lifestyle review
Mhm.
and change, and it really can take time. Like we've got to think of how long we've struggled with this stuff, probably the amount of inflammation that we're carrying in our body. There's no one quick thing that's
Mhm.
going to do it. It's a real gradual process. But yeah, I mean, as you said, touching on the victim mentality, like it's true. Like we've been there, we've been in so much pain that it's like it is triggering when someone's just like, yeah, well, I don't have symptoms anymore and I did it naturally, because it's just like
Mhm.
it makes you so angry. But I think there's also just a point of like, when do you want to let go of that part of you? And for
Mhm.
some people, and this is kind of what I was saying about when I choose who I work with, they are so caught up in the fact that I have endometriosis and it rules my life, that
Mhm.
I'm like, but are you ready to not have endometriosis? Like, are you ready for a life outside of it? Because in some
Mhm.
people it serves you. And again, that's probably a longer conversation with the whole
Mhm.
psychological side to it. But it's for some people, it's they build an identity around it. So they can't
Yeah.
just let it go, even though they think that they want to. On a
Yeah.
subconscious level, it's so weaved into who they are as a person that they're not ready.
Yeah. All very true. What is your top piece of advice that you would give to women who are like currently struggling with really like any chronic illness? It doesn't have to be endometriosis and are kind of starting to look for holistic lifestyles or holistic lifestyle changes. What would be like your first tip of advice if you want to start looking into holistic health? I feel like it's kind of a loaded question, but
It's a good question. It's like there's so many parts. I think that I would say look at your nutrition and look at your stress levels.
Mhm.
Because if nutrition's really poor, or if you are really chronically stressed, it's both of those things carry so much inflammation that it will have a massive impact on you. So
Mhm.
I'd almost just say like start there, but also just like advocate for yourself. Like literally get to know who you are, learn to meditate, do those things to
Mhm.
learn how to follow your instincts and your gut, because that's what drove me. Like I
Yeah.
started to do this stuff and I was like, I don't feel right about this. And that literally was my guide for the way of like getting off birth control, because it didn't feel right. And
Yeah.
I really advocate for that. Like follow what feels true for you. And then nutrition and stress are big ones.
Yeah. And one thing about stress too, which is interesting, my family's great. We have a really great relationship now, but growing up, I lived a very like stressful life. There was a lot of stress growing up. So I just kind of got used to like living in a stressful environment. Like that was what felt normal to me. So as an adult, like throughout college and now in my adult life, I my doctors would ask me, they'd be like I got diagnosed with anxiety and I never ever said that I argued it. I was like, I do not have anxiety. Like I don't know why you keep putting that on my chart. I'm like, take it off. I don't have anxiety. And my gynecologist is like, you are one of the most anxious people I've ever met. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't have anxiety. I don't feel stressed. I don't know what you're talking about. And there was a point with my one gynecologist, which I honestly, even now, like, I don't agree with what she was saying. Just like how she said it, I don't think was appropriate. But it got to a point in my endometriosis journey. I was like 20, and she was like, you need to treat your anxiety because your stress and anxiety is causing some of your symptoms. Like you're having flares, or maybe not causing, but they're correlated, because she was like, you're having more flares because you can't get your anxiety under control. And I was like, I don't have anxiety. I don't know what you're talking about. So I don't know how to control it if I don't feel like I have it. And she was like, I'm not going to treat you anymore until you see a therapist and you get on anti-anxiety medication, because there's no point. She was like, I can't help you because you won't control your own body. And I just like, even now I'm like, okay, maybe that, like, maybe she really did feel like that. But again, like, I wasn't in a place to hear that. So it didn't do anything for me. But I just didn't like, it's difficult because even then, like looking back on it, I had a doctor being like, look at your stress levels. And I was like, what stress levels? I'm fine. Like for some reason, because I grew up in such like a fight or flight mode, I couldn't register what was stress. The only time that I registered stress was if I was having a panic attack. Because then
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, I'm stressed. I can't breathe. I have to like sit down and try to catch my breath. And my heart rate is like 170. And I'm like, oh, this is stress. But then as an adult now and like years of therapy, I was like, oh, okay. So I was just like constantly in stress. But like sometimes you don't realize that because your vision, like what you think stress is, for me, what I thought stress was an active panic attack. But in reality, I was stressed all the time and I just didn't know.
Yeah,
So
100%.
how
And
it can
it's
get
so
difficult.
common. I have so many women I ask, and I'm like, ask about stress levels, and they're like, yeah, I'm not that stressed. I get up at 6 every day and I go for a run for an hour. I'm working full time and I don't get along with my boss, and like I feel like shit when I'm at work, and then I go out and like meet friends most nights. I don't really sleep very well. Like my dad's in and out of the hospital, but I'm fine. And I'm like, are you fucking joking me? Sorry, I don't know swearing's allowed here.
No,
I'm
you're
just
fine.
like,
You can swear.
I'm just like, are you kidding? Like, even one of those things, like, even one thing in isolation, like, you don't get along with your boss at work, the impact that that has. But, like you said, so many people think it's when you're on that verge of a panic attack, but it's like
Hmm.
actually, like, and sleep's the big one. It's always like, I don't know anyone who can sleep well if they're having a lot of stress going on in their
Yeah.
life. So that's always a sign. But it's just like, if you actually reel off, like, how do you feel about your relationship, about your health, about your family, about your work?
Hmm.
Stuff that's going on like that, even if you just write it down and start to look at it, that should be a little bit of an indicator to be like, oh, okay, actually, there's quite a lot of stuff here that's going on. And maybe I feel fine, but maybe it's because I'm just really disassociated and living
Yeah.
in my head and totally not in touch with my body at all.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that it helps a lot when you start to um maybe like your definition of stress is not actually what the question is asking. Like the question is asking if you're stressed from the basic definition of stress. Like, and I feel like how I say it now is like if I'm talking to a therapist, I'll be like, I mentally do not feel stressed, but my body feels stressed because I'm waking up with bloating every single day. So I'm like, that is an indicator that my body is stressed out, even though like I may not feel that way. And I have oldest daughter syndrome. I don't know, like I'm the oldest. I have four little brothers, and I feel like I take on a lot, and I've done that my whole life. And I'm always like, oh, I have 2 hours of spare time. I can start another thing. And I've had to really like hone back on that because I found that that is actually like I just run myself to the ground all the time. And that was a big trigger for having endo flare-ups, which is weird. Like 18-year-old Lexi is like, why? Like that's stupid. Why would my body do that? But now it makes a lot of sense. Like I'm already with endometriosis, I had high inflammation and then I'm running my body to the ground, so I'm creating more inflammation. Of course I'm gonna have a flare up. Like that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. I think we just have to rework in our brains like what stress actually means, and then you can be more realistic with yourself about it.
Yeah, definitely. There's probably a meaning behind stress that a lot of people just see in a very particular way.
Hmm. Okay, so closing out, is there anything else that you want to say really quick before we end things?
The one thing I'd really quickly say is that
Yeah.
there's lots of research now that shows that women have way higher rates of chronic illness than men
Hmm.
do. And what is kind of coming through that is that women are kind of like you touched on, we're caretakers, we're people pleasers, we're perfectionists. Like as women, we have this thing of always feeling like we're not good enough and we're not doing
Hmm.
enough. We're stuck in that perpetual cycle. And I honestly believe that there's a lot of that that actually makes us sick as well. So I think that if you're someone who you know that you're also a bit of a people pleaser and a perfectionist and stuff, a big part of my work, I'm massive on boundaries as well. And I really
Hmm.
think that's a really important part of your health process. And some people are like, how? That doesn't make sense. And I'm like, once you can advocate for yourself, once you can set boundaries around like what your expectations are of other people, once you are going to like set your ground and say what you're available for and you're not, I also think that's a really big part of healing any type of chronic condition. So yeah, I would end on that probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I 1000% agree with that. And honestly, I had a hard time like doing that for myself, but now that I've always wanted kids, I've always wanted to be a mom, and now that I'm not ready to have kids yet, but as I'm getting older, I what really like pushed me to start setting boundaries and like actually start taking care of my body is like thinking about my future kids. And I'm like, how am I going to be a good parent if I can't even do that for myself? Like how am I going to teach kids that? And I know that that is some people, like I have friends in my life that are like, "Oh, why couldn't you just do that for yourself?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but thinking about like having a future daughter and like I don't want to teach them to not take care of their body and to not put themselves first and not have boundaries and be a people pleaser and a perfectionist when in reality, like I was doing more harm to myself than I even realized. So I don't know, thinking about little future babies has definitely helped me start actually taking care of my body, which I don't know what that says, but it
But I think
helps.
that is you doing it for yourself, but you have
Hmm.
identified a dream, which is a lot of what I do with clients. Like, what is the dream? Where do you want to get to? And like for
Hmm.
some women, it's like to be able to get pregnant and stuff like that. So it's like we know that by being pregnant as the woman, you give the baby a blueprint. Your nervous system, your stress levels, your inflammation, your toxic load, all of that is passed on to your baby. So
Hmm.
actually, it is you doing it for yourself, but you've just got the dream in mind. So I think it's
Yeah.
amazing that you've found the inspiration from somewhere and you're able to do this stuff now to create a
Hmm.
better life for you, number one. And then when you do choose to have children and the time's right, hopefully
Hmm.
that good stuff passes on to them.
Yeah, I hope so too. So where can listeners find you and connect with you, find your website, more info?
Yeah. So my Instagram is at Holistic Health Daisy,
Hmm.
and there's links on there. I also have a website which is coachdaisy.co.uk.
Beautiful. I'll also link that in the show notes. And yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You've been great. I love that we've broke down some boundaries about coaching in general. And I really hope that people found something to take away from this, which I'm sure that they did.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I've enjoyed listening to some of your previous ones as well, and I think
Oh,
that
thank you.
this is just like the medicine. This is what people need, and I think especially hearing just authentic stories, hopefully like this, but some are like the other ones that I've listened to. That yeah, I hope it lands, and just good luck, and we'll stay in touch as well.
That wraps up today's conversation with Daisy. I really hope that her journey inspired you as much as it inspired me. Her story is a reminder that even with chronic conditions like endometriosis, there is still hope for some type of healing. Although you may not ever be necessarily symptom free, I still struggle with symptoms 7 years past my diagnosis. Some different types of symptom management have helped me live a better, less symptom ridden life. If you want to learn more about Daisy and her holistic health coaching, be sure to check out the show notes for all the details. Thank you so much for listening to the Chronic Chronicles. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, rate this podcast, and please follow us on social media at Chronic Chronicles Pod. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep thriving.